The Planning Commission podcast is a spirited discussion with myself and a couple of my longtime colleagues in the profession. Our discussions are based solely on our own opinions and do not reflect the opinions or views of our employers, the American Planning Association, or even our alma maters. So grab a seat in the back of City Hall, dig out an old copy of Robert's Rules, and for goodness sakes, read your packet. The Planning Commission is now in session.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Planning Commission podcast. And action. So you want to direct? Oh, do you now? Are you sure about that? We're going to talk all about directing as a planner with our fantastic guests momentarily. But in the meantime, for the three of us, oh my gosh, directing. It's the top of the peak, right? It's the top of the heap. It's where we all try to get to when we're all in planner school, except for Jess, who didn't go to planner school, we know, right? But it's the ultimate, I think it's the ultimate objective, right? Would you guys agree?
I think if you're going to try to climb the ladder and have those aspirations, yeah, that's the thing to do. But I think as we get into the discussion, do you actually get to actually do work, or do you just have to direct once you get into it? I think that's the challenge.
What do you think, Jess? You don't want to be the director? You don't want all the responsibility?
Oh, you know what? I didn't really worry so much about the responsibility. What I had a lot of fun doing was helping them be happy to come to work, kind of getting out of the way and letting them do their job. I get bored real quick with projects because it's like, well, eventually it's like, well, I did a comp plan. I got to do another? Oh, I have to update the same old one. Oh no. So I would start to go, that's not my favorite. But some people, that's what they love. They want to do a project. They want to do a plan. Everything is fun for them and they like to try it over and over again. So I was really happy as a director. I loved that.
There you go. Well, so we've kind of had this conversation over multiple episodes, right? The beginning, the education side, then the beginning of entering into the field, and then management, and now really the director position, which is pretty much as high as you're going to get. I mean, there are some mayors that have come from the planning background, and I think we're going to maybe have one here in the near future on. But this is pretty much, where it gets to and what we hope to achieve, I think, is our career. So let me ask you, two of you, when have you directed? And I don't mean as a planner, in some other way of life. When have you been a director, quote unquote? I'll give you the air quotes just so you have a safe out, right? But when have you directed, and what lessons did you learn from those experiences that maybe you have applied to planning? Either of you have an answer right off the bat? I'd put you on the spot right off the bat here.
I just want to know if Don ever directed any like clogging classes.
No, I didn't get to that level in clogging. I have a trophy, but I didn't get to director level of that.
Yeah, well, my first kind of direct was, like a conductor. So I was a music student, right? And conducting a ensemble is something you have to do at some point. And I was in a band, if you will, and we were singers, and we were backed up, and we dressed up like the Andrews Sisters, and we sang in every retirement community in the Southeast, I'm pretty sure. We didn't go much further than about 300 miles from Caldwell County, but in music and in my career in music, it was so important to have somebody that led, right? So even if you weren't that, there's a lot of different kinds of directors in music, right? There's clearly the conductor that's in front of an orchestra and that kind of thing. But when you're in a small ensemble, there's often a director who's also taking part in the musical performance, right? So someone has to lead, someone has to be leading. And so you're leading with your eyes, you're leading with your hand, different things. And it's almost like this, you breathe, and everyone knows we're going to start. It's very subtle, but you have to know how to do that. And I think that what I took from being in that part of, in that career and in that world, is that when you can figure out your team well enough that you can look, or you can even take a breath in a meeting and they all look at you and they go, okay, We're about to hear some direction. I mean, it's kind of
wait, is it a look or is it like the look where you're like,
no, it's like a kick
giving
under the
this-
table. Hey, later.
right. I'm glad to hear you say that, because every time I see a conductor up in front just doing this thing, I don't know what they're actually doing. It just seems like, is anybody
keeping
really at
time.
the helm? Yeah, I guess. And they're all prestigious, and they're like, the person that takes the bow. And I'm kind of going, man, I don't know. I'm glad to hear
Would
you
it
say
would
that
it
there's
all go
more.
to hell if they weren't
Right.
standing up there with a bunch of
Could you just
professional
have-
musicians in front of them?
Probably.
Really?
Probably?
Oh,
Okay.
man.
All right. Good.
I mean,
I'm
they're
gonna take
doing,
your word for it.
they're making cute. Well, and I'll tell you real quick. The thing that a conductor is doing in front of any musical group big like that is they are making cues about things that you've discussed beforehand, but everybody needs to do together. And it's not like in the piece of music, right? You may have made a note, but he's going to be like, we're going to hold out this fermata, a thing that, makes a note hold longer than it's supposed to.
I
And
think I had a Fernata, a cheese.
well, somebody
that's-
has to say, we're now done holding this note. And that could be at any time. So that's why your conductor is important. And, a director's like that, it would be like sometimes you're studying something and you're studying something and you're studying something. And then you go, we got to stop studying this and like do some implementation. It's the same, right?
I guess so. All right, Don, you hit it. What
Boy, I
what
think-
ways? And you can't talk about your T-ball injury and directing the Bad News Bears. You gotta have something.
Was that like
different than
last week or
Directing the T-ball championship? No, I was a
championship. Watch out.
Oh yeah, be careful.
in
Mic drop.
high school. I was, I guess, director, supervisor, whatever, for like catering gigs and other dining room stuff at this Southern style resort restaurant in North Georgia. So
yes.
you want to talk about herding cats? Well, I also had the advantage or disadvantage of here I am at 16, 17, 18, and I'm a director of people that are twice my age, of people that are in college. And oh, by the way, I'm underage and I can't serve alcohol, but I'm responsible for making sure the event did that properly, and certainly making sure the other underage people on our team were not imbibing at the same time. And so that made, all the planning director stuff later on seem pretty easy in doing that. But, people aren't going to like being in their 20s or early 30s and being supervised and directed by someone that's half their age, especially someone in high school. So that was always a challenge to get over on that particular front.
And some prude that won't let him have a little cocktail now.
I know.
Jeez.
I've heard some of this.
I never got into any of that. That was no.
I've heard some of the Dillard House stories, and win some, you lose some, right, Don?
Ironically, that's where I stayed for 2 days last weekend at my old stomping grounds, and was in the place where, as that director, I was, overseeing the service of celebrities and, Jimmy Carter and Burt Reynolds and stuff like that, and making sure we didn't spill the gravy on their laps. So,
oh, well, that would be bad. So we talked about Deliverance last time, and so okay, enough said. My brief, I'm going to be quick because I want to get to our guest. I mean, in terms of directing, man, one of my favorite things I've ever done is coach. Is coach basketball. I started off coaching boys, and I was really young at the time, and it was fun and easy. And then the girls basketball coach called me and said, "Hey, would you want to coach girls?" And I was an idiot. I was, young and just probably way over my skis. I'm like, really? And then I took the job, and man, it was so rewarding. It was so rewarding, is to lead young minds and to get them to, as a team, work together to achieve a goal, and to watch them, actually make that happen is just a whole lot of fun. And so
well, we coordinated the right dessert service at the right time. That was as close as I could get there. We got the ice cream out concurrently with the cake,
the Jello.
A win.
Yeah. Well, that's impressive. I've been to the Dillard House, and the dessert spread is quite something to behold. So yes. All right, real quick, Don, hit us with the whiskey pairing. What is our whiskey for? And action. So you want to direct.
So in the last week, Commissioner Kostelek was out scouting future whiskey pairings in Tennessee, Georgia, North Carolina. Yeah. So Given our guests' North Carolina ties and mine, as well as Jess's, I'm going to go with a whiskey I discovered last week.
Oh,
Steel Horse from a distillery in Asheville, North Carolina. And the interesting thing about this one, this is only batch number 7, and we were fortunate enough to be at the place while they released it, because they told myself and my fiance they'd be out of it in a couple of weeks. They don't measure their aging of this in years; they measure it in miles. And what do they mean by that? If you've ever seen like a vehicle testing where you put the front wheel of the vehicle on the rollers,
yes,
that's what they do with the whiskey barrels here.
Oh, wow.
And they roll them on that for 2,000 miles, and then they age them for 3 years. And so it's the very same theory as the aged at sea that Jefferson does.
Yes,
it's the sloshing around that gives it extra and quicker aging under their theory. But Asheville, North Carolina, Steel Horse, aged 2,000 miles.
It's like a whiskey chew in the barrel, though, right?
Yes.
Wow. How arrogant is the whiskey profession getting? I mean, honestly, man, like we're just.
Is it arrogant or is it just a little bougie? And I like it.
Okay, good word.
Okay,
You like it.
I like it. It's
All right,
refined, really.
Fair enough. All right. Well, with that, let's move forward to our guest today, a director in his own right and quite seasoned and experienced, and we're thrilled to death to have him. Our guest today is none other than the Planning and Zoning Director for the city of Boise, Tim Keane. And Tim, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you joining us here on the Planning Commission podcast.
Did you just call me seasoned? Was that the word that I heard? Seasoned. This is the first time I've been called seasoned.
Listen, he just called whiskey
Good
arrogant.
Lord.
This guy doesn't know.
I guess seasoned is way better than what it could have been.
Yeah,
Thank you, Chris.
My pleasure. And so yes,
y'all just confused me in this whole conversation. I heard Dillard
like
House. I heard
like
Caldwell County. I heard. All kinds of coaching, basketball.
We're all over the map. It's 2020.
Okay.
Yeah. We got to be gentle in this year on how and what we call people. So I'm going to call myself seasoned after all the grays in my goatee, and so hopefully that works. But Tim, tell us all about you. Tell all 5 of our listeners, because I think we're growing 1 a month. Who are you? Your background, and how did you land in Boise?
Yeah, well, that's probably the most interesting part of it, the end there. Well, I've, I don't know. Been working in planning for a while. My first experience was in Wilmington, North Carolina, actually, which I don't talk a lot about. I wasn't director at the time, but spent a few years there. And a few years in Wilmington, I decided I absolutely don't want to do this. This is, I don't even understand what's happening. I remember being in Wilmington and being a zoning planner and going to city council and listening to the things that would be said. And I literally was thinking, are we adult human beings here? It just seems so odd, the whole profession. So I actually left to go to school to get an MPA, and went to Davidson, North Carolina as their first planning director in 1994, because they were worried about the growth from Charlotte coming. So they felt they needed somebody to help them. And so they hired me. And during my time in Davidson, I learned to love planning, and then decided to go to graduate school in architecture as a result. So that's how I got started. Then so I was in Davidson, a little town in North Carolina, beautiful college town, north of Charlotte, for a few years. And when you're in a small town like that, you never are not working. You know what I mean? I lived on Main Street. Every conversation I had in my life was about what was happening in Davidson. So I could take that for about 5 years, and I loved it. And the people there were amazing and mean so much to me. But I left to go to Charleston, South Carolina, mainly because Joe Riley was the mayor, and I knew of him, and he was somewhat of a hero of mine. So I went and spent most of my career so far in Charleston, South Carolina, but left when Joe Riley was retiring in 2015. And Kasim Reed, who was the mayor of Atlanta at the time, hired me to be their commissioner of city planning. And I was there for about 7 years, and on the third mayor while I was in Atlanta, and decided to leave, and thought that I should try something completely different since I'd been in the Southeast my whole life. And you know, I did. I found something completely different, and that's Boise, Idaho. And I've been there since March. So that's a quick summary of my experience. I've been a planning director since 1994, and a small town, then a small city, big city, and back to a small city.
Well, Tim, I want to dig a little bit before you became a planning director in Davidson, your first planning director job. How did you climb that ladder as a planning professional? You started in Wilmington, maybe? What was happening? What gave you that first Davidson job, that first planning director? Maybe you were a manager before that or something.
Well, I was actually, the first job was Concord, North Carolina. When I graduated, I had 2 job offers when I graduated. One was to work for a newspaper and be a reporter, and the other was to be a planner with the city of Concord. And I took the planning job only because it paid about $2,000 more a month or a year.
I was gonna say a month.
That was
wow.
a year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I was
that
like,
was a good.
Boy,
I've
really been.
And the planning director in Concord, North Carolina at the time was a wonderful man named Jeff Young. Just the best person to start your career with. But I really wanted to get to the coast. That's why I went to Wilmington shortly after starting my career. But, you know, how did I think I just, you know, I've been lucky, I think, because when I left Wilmington, I was a planner there. I was probably a senior planner was my title or something. And I was working on zoning cases. And the move to Davidson really was the move that changed my career. And maybe it's something to learn from, in the sense that you go to a really progressive small town and you do really great things that can lead to lots of opportunity. You know, it certainly did for me. I didn't expect that. It wasn't intentional. It was just luck, I guess, that I ended up in Davidson as a small town planning director with an amazing mayor, first Russell Knox and then Randy Kincaid, and a town manager who everyone would want, Lehman Bryce, who was town manager in Davidson for a long time. Great thing about Lehman was he was like me. We were like, planning seems to really suck, you know, let's do something different. let's do something different. And Lehman was always just like, yeah, let's do that. You know what I mean? So not a typical town manager. So yeah, I had this great, incredible luck of, you know, being with these amazing people that were completely open-minded about how to do the work.
You know,
I think there's our bumper stickers. Planning doesn't have to suck.
Planning doesn't.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh my gosh,
that's been my goal since the mid-90s.
And it's something we talk about, right, Don, Chris? We've talked about how, like, why do we keep doing things this way? Planners are so talented. They have come from such a mixture of backgrounds. You went to architecture school. I went to engineering school. But before that, I was in music school. You know, Don, strangely enough, was a reporter. And everybody but me was in sports. So, you know, I was too busy trying to not break my fingers so I could play the piano at church on Sunday morning. So, you know, but
Tim, tell me, Tim, tell me a little bit, because I mean, if that was your first director gig, I've always used in the work I've done in Davidson as, you know, here's an example that, and many places have this trait, if one, you're desirable, and two, you can then formulate your policies around what you want, you get the urban design and urban fabric that you want. So many places will be like, oh, why does that fill in your chain store name look that bad or look this way? And I'm like, well, if your city has design standards and things that demand more of it and they want to be there, they will conform. to it. So what kind of lessons did you learn from that first
Well,
directorship there?
the thing about my time in Davidson was I've felt all along that planning is a practice that just doesn't work. Seriously. I mean, it just doesn't work.
There's our other
and so
bumper sticker.
we
Man.
have been, no,
Thank
seriously.
you.
I mean, we were exploring, how do you do it differently? In Davidson, the big issues were protecting the farms around the town.
Yeah.
And it became the flashpoint because we had a lot of success with that. But the flashpoint was, in order, we were growing. So to save the farms meant that the town needed to grow within itself. It started there, like Main Street and the neighborhoods around the town need to be the places that grow, not the farms, which would be the typical process. And so we did a lot of work around that, the regulations that we had, the plan that we created, the protections that were put in place for the farmland around Davidson. So it was all those things, and we were really exploring the plan and code side of things. You remember the mid 90s was a time of a lot of discussion about places like Seaside and Kentlands and places that were just somewhat getting started, but the discussion was all around how do we do this differently? And really this, I'll mention this because I've talked to Andres Duani about this, but he was coming to Mecklenburg County. I think Charlotte brought him or someone, and we invited him to Davidson's, and we sent him a bunch of stuff for him to look at. I'm sure he didn't before he got there, but we had like a Saturday event with our town council for him to speak and all this kind of stuff. And at that point, the town council was very skeptical of me. That they didn't think, and they were right, that I knew what I was talking about. And I was just bluffing it. But he comes, and literally in this meeting, he says to our town council, the one thing I know you must do is you must listen to this guy. And he points to me. And so they were like so enamored with him. And for him to say that, like my whole life changed that day. Yeah. Because from then on, everything I said was like, they believed it 100%. That was fairly early in my time there. It was probably 1996 or so. So that was a big moment because we were doing things that we were kind of making up as we went along when it comes to how do you do these things. So,
well, if ever there was a time for you to go and ask for a nice big raise, right? Like I just got blessed by one of the world's biggest, can we talk about 20% bump here? Right.
Yeah.
Like, you're in the catbird seat, man. That's pretty awesome.
Well, yeah.
So Tim, tell me a little bit about, for anybody who's listening here, who maybe is sort of in the midst of their career of planning that is sucking, as you so eloquently said, right? Think about this. I'm curious, what are the qualities that you have either tried to sort of, embody or have learned along the way that you think have allowed you to be a pretty successful director in many of these places?
Well, I think there's two things that are, I think it's important for a planning director to both be able to understand the kind of bigger issues, the longer term, some might say more visionary aspects of the work, have a firm handle on that, but also be interested in and capable of dealing with the details. I think if you have one or the other, you're not going to get there. You like really have to embrace both sides of this thing. And how do you establish vision? How do you establish aspirational, goals for your organization and for your city? But then how are you able to put things in practice in a very detailed step-by-step way? I think that's a fundamentally important thing. I also think it's important that we in this profession evolve. I want to shake people sometimes that are in this profession around, will you just listen? Can you just open your mind for a moment to the idea that what you've been trained to do is broken. Just you're smart people. Just open your mind to things. And I think, somehow planners have gotten so comfortable with tools and processes that are at best innocuous or irrelevant. But why do you keep doing it? I just so I think, the director part of it, I think, is this issue of dealing with things in a great variety of scales. But I think for the profession, I think it's really just, come on, let's have some new ideas. And the problem is, when you hear about ideas and things, within this profession, they're always very kind of, they're very tactical. There's never any more strategic change, right? It's always I'm not saying this isn't a good thing right here, but I just think it's very interesting and condemning of the profession that there's so much there's so much happiness or glory around the idea that we're eliminating parking minimums. Like this is a major step forward for this profession. This is like the iPhone for Apple or something. My God, look what this profession's doing. It's like, guys, we've been talking about parking for decades, and now there's you don't have parking minimums anymore, and this is some kind of great victory. It's like, again, great. We shouldn't have parking. No doubt. But that's what we hang our hat on. It's just like that. But that's what I mean. It's like, it's always at that, level to me within the profession that we have these victory laps around these relatively tiny little increments of movement. And it's never like, and I have thoughts about why this is so, but what happened to the profession. But I think that's something, that anybody that's listening that's in the profession, just open your mind to things. You got a lot of, Jessica said it, we got such smart people in this profession. Let's create new things. It's a tough environment. I know. I'm not diminishing the environment that we work in, but I just think, I'm telling you what in my career has resulted in my movement to bigger places. I was in a small town. It's not typical to go from a small town to a small city to a big city. Usually you in a career path, you're in a certain band, of size. So it's very unusual to go from a city of 5,000 to a city of 500,000 in a region of 6 million. That's not typical. So for me, I would say the way that that's happened is this: having an open mind, saying, let's create things. Let's serve the people of this place in ways that they haven't experienced before. That's what's worked for me.
So you didn't get the job saying you were going to eliminate parking minimums, and that was the moment they decided to offer it to. And Don, I didn't say I'm going to do this kick-ass comp plan. I never said that. Believe me.
But for those of you that have gotten a job by saying sometimes that's the way in. You got to start where they are. You got to meet your people where they're at. Right?
That's the new Daniel Burnham. Make no kick-ass comp plans.
I'm sorry. And I'm a little angry at the profession, not individuals.
Well, we're over here laughing about the parking minimums and how that's a victory laugh. And I'm laughing so that I don't cry. I'm a crier. I get frustrated and I cry. And it's just, there have been times that I have had to, just kind of run up against the same wall over and over again, and about things that seem so small, but will make, they'll make a nice change. It'll be a good thing, whether it's tactical or strategic. And I'm sitting there going, so at the end of the day, after you beat your head that many times, for the planners out there that are dealing with things like trying to institute a parking minimum, boy, when you finally get that, it's like, we got to celebrate the little things. But it is rough. And it's funny that you even brought that up, because I remember reading Donald Shoup when I was in undergrad. I was at UNC Charlotte, and I was taking a class called Urban Transportation Problems. And they told us what an MPO was, and they told us what a commissioner of transportation was.
man.
And I'm sitting there going, I didn't know any of these things, and I thought I was pretty smart. And then strangely enough, when I was at NC State for my graduate program, again, I'm in an engineering program, and they offered a program or a class in the engineering program, the civil engineering program called transportation planning and policy and funding. And in that
sounds
class,
riveting, doesn't it? That
actually,
sounds-
listen, it's the reason I'm a planner. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Hummer, because what happened is he taught this class and he just felt like transportation engineers were producing them and they had no idea how the system worked to the outside of, let's design this road or whatever. And so I took this course and we read Donald Shoup and the why taxis are still in New York City and different things like this. And I remember thinking, this was in 2006 was when or whatever, when and it's coming around, and that was written years before. I'm just sitting here going, I don't really understand why we just don't do these things. This makes the most sense. Well, sometimes just because it makes sense to you, it doesn't mean it makes sense to other folks. So anyway, speaking of 20 some years ago, I want to know, Tim, like, how do you think a freshly minted planner today, or even a mid-level planner in 2022, how do you think they're different than they were 20 years ago? And are we getting better? Are we getting worse? Do you see a difference? Is it kind of the same? We just talked about parking minimums. Maybe it's the same.
I don't see a huge difference, honestly, Jessica. And I've spent enough time at different universities that have planning programs to experience what's going on within the planning education at the college level in this country, and I think it's very disappointing. Again, I think you're there again. You're I've been at some really good institutions that I go and wonder, gosh, what are we doing here?
What's making it that way? What do you see?
Well, I think it's reinforcing the same kinds of ways of working.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
gosh.
It's, to me,
We're still teaching the plan of Chicago, people.
Well, but the
120
thing
years
about
later.
that, I'm not sure. Yeah, but even worse than that, it's always, I don't know. I read things that I see out of schools that are producing a lot of planners, for cities everywhere, and it just, I think it's incomprehensible to some degree. I feel like we're teaching something that most people get no value from and have no interest in understanding, which is a shame for a profession where you think people probably would be kind of intrigued by city planning. It sounds interesting. It is, in many ways, and it's such a fascinating kind of public service, that is so unique. And yet the way we're teaching it, you're taking all the life out of it and all the creativity out of it. I don't understand, and you mentioned the plan of Chicago. And to me, the thing I have been telling people is you got to remember, city planning is not a new thing. Okay. It was in the early 1730s when Oglethorpe did his plan for Savannah. That was 10 years before Thomas Jefferson was born.
Yeah.
The design for our nation's capital occurred in the late 1700s. The plan of Chicago was in the early 20th century, of course. So we're 200 years just, into this practice here. And what changed everything, I think, is the fact that, so you had this idea of comp plans and things from right before the Great Depression, but you had the Great Depression, you had World War II, and coming out of World War II, we entered into urban renewal. So between 1949 and 1974, cities were incredibly harmed by urban renewal, great destruction of cities across this country during urban renewal, and great harm to people as a result of urban renewal. And by the time it was over, I think people said, we're not planning anymore. This is the end of planning. And so the American Planning Association, which was the combination of two other organizations, was created in 1978. And to me, the big change that occurred were two things. One is that we replaced the idea of design as being the central issue in city planning. We replaced it with law.
Mhm.
So the central issue guiding planning now is legal things. Before then, it was design. People were seeking to design cities. And I mean, there's lots of aspects to planning. We all know this. There's policy, there's regulations, all these things. But the central piece was the design of the city. It was replaced with law only 44 years ago.
Yeah.
Relatively new turn of events in this particular practice. So that's one thing. The second thing is we no longer were looking at what's the optimal condition for, I think one of the important things about planning is it's the one responsibility at the city level that is responsible for the whole city. Planning is supposed to be about the whole, right? It's not about individual parts. It uniquely is about the whole. And somehow we also lost this idea that we should be seeking the optimal condition in our city. And we started to mitigate and balance things. There was a great attorney in Charleston who was on our gentrification task force. And this really came to me at one of our meetings when Howard Yates, there was a lot of discussion in Charleston about balancing growth, because it's such a historic, it's a very kind of, fine-grained, beautiful historic city. And all this growth is happening. And there was all this discussion about balancing growth, balancing. So we go through all these meetings balancing. At one point, Howard's like, why are we balancing? I mean, that doesn't sound great. It's like, why aren't we seeking the optimal solution? Which made so much sense to me. And ever since then, I've been talking about this and pursuing it in Charleston and then Atlanta, because that's what the profession was. It became a balancing profession. It became a mitigating. It became this kind of passive aggressive, profession, I think, because of urban renewal, because people said, oh, if that's what planning is, we're stopping that. But hey, guys, we're 44 years later. We've learned a lot. Can we go back to the scale of the city and figure out a better way of doing it? We've learned so much.
I love that point of optimization versus balance. And it comes up when we work on transportation things of, we now seek a balanced transportation system.
Yeah.
Well, we've spent 60 years with a total imbalance.
Yeah.
That if
Right.
we're only looking today to balance, nothing will ever be achieved that's optimal. Tim, what would you say is your biggest success story, going back to this theme of choosing design over law and understanding that's important? What's been your biggest success story in accomplishing that?
Well, it have to be Atlanta City Design in Atlanta. So when I got to Atlanta, Kasim Reed, who hired me, was very interested in doing things differently. Like if I think he hired me because I'd been in Charleston and had different ideas about things. And so he was hugely supportive of trying something different. And so I met when I got to Atlanta, an amazing person named Ryan Gravel, who you all may know, who was a graduate student at Georgia Tech and came up with the idea for the Beltline in Atlanta, which is now substantially underway and fundamentally changing the city. And there's lots of concerns about it, as there would be in any city when you have something that is generating so much development. But it's in a good way making Atlanta more urban and connected and all these things. But anyway, so Ryan and I met and we were able to get Ryan to work with us on Atlanta City Design. And we went through this year and a half long process. And so the idea with Atlanta City Design was really, this is just kind of a plan or wonk thing. But it was like, this is a way to change the process. What we're suggesting is, you don't need to just plan the city, you need to design the city. And the way the planning process should work is it should be a 3-phase process, with the first phase being a conceptual design for the city. If you're designing a great building, that design starts with a concept. If it doesn't, then you're only going to get a mediocre building. The best building has a really solid concept. And the same goes for the city, is my suggestion. At the city scale, Atlanta's 135 square miles. So we were saying, we've got to do a conceptual design for the city, number one. The second step would be design development with a whole host of things, which would include a comprehensive plan. It would include our transportation plan. In Atlanta's case, our housing plan, all this kind of stuff. So the second phase of planning is design development. And the third phase of planning is design for construction, whether that's actual design for projects, like in Atlanta's case, we did this design for the remaking of the Five Points MARTA station, and we had this design for Peachtree Street in downtown and started executing on that. Or it could be designed through regulations, enabling private people to build things. This concentration on design, even at that third phase, I think is so important.
Yeah.
But you have to see all these phases as one thing. This is what planning misses. When you in the work of planning today, you have the comprehensive plan and you have zoning. Those are the two big tools. But there isn't really, comprehensive plans don't say anything specific about what a city should become. You know what I mean? They're laundry lists of and everybody,
Health
we
and
all know,
safety.
hey, let's
we want
talk
to feel
about
good.
this.
Economy.
Hey, this is a safe space here, right? We can talk about comp
It
plans.
is now.
So
Wait. Before you jump into this, keep in mind, I am one of your planning and zoning commissioners.
You
tasked-
are?
You didn't know that? Oh my God.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding,
Yes,
Chris.
okay,
I knew
okay.
that. I knew that. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I can't.
Whew.
I
wasn't
I
really.
knew that, Chris. I'm
Okay.
saying something that everybody knows. I mean,
I just want you. We are in a safe space, and I definitely want you to speak your mind. And I'm pretty sure we're tracking on the same track. But
yeah,
go
I've
ahead.
been talking about this
making
since
sure.
the mid '90s, so this is nothing new.
Okay.
I've said it before, but it's not. It's just the concern is yes, it's that the tools that we have are so ineffective, and you could argue part of the reason cities have not done well. Paul Krugman wrote a great column in the New York Times right after Hurricane Harvey in Houston. So this would have been 2017, I guess. And the headline of it was, "Why can't we get cities right?" And he was contrasting cities like Houston, which he was describing as places that will allow you to build anything anywhere, with cities like San Francisco, which he was describing as cities that won't allow you to build anything anywhere. So they become so unaffordable and inaccessible to people. But when I read his column then, and I believe this very much, when you say, why can't we get cities right? You have to point at the planning profession, right? I mean, we've got to be in the room when it comes to that, at least. And so in an environment where we're not addressing these big issues that cities need addressed, like housing affordability, mobility, and my goodness, adapting to a changing climate, we haven't been able to address these issues. Folks, that means we've got to take a different approach, a fundamentally different approach. I don't mean change the name of the comp plan to something else. I mean, get to the core of what we're doing and how we do it. And we have to explore that. And we're not doing it as a profession. I'm lucky in my experience as a planning director that I've worked with people that have felt this way and allowed us to explore this idea in Davidson, Charleston, and Atlanta. And so that's, I think, talking about planning director, that's what's distinguished my time in this profession is that experience of being with people that want to explore doing it better.
So, Tim, this has been everything we could want in a conversation. I'm going to speak for my fellow commissioners on this one. And given our amount of time left, we're going to change subjects a little bit, and we're going to hit our lightning round. So I have a feeling that maybe one of these days, if you're so inclined, we might have you join us if you would be willing to anyway, because I have a feeling that we can continue this conversation for probably
I didn't even get to the good stuff yet.
I know. There's a lot of questions.
I'm holding back here.
Oh man. There's a lot of questions that I know I have, and I'm sure my fellow commissioners have, and we'd love to explore. So maybe a part 2, and who knows, maybe even a part 3. But something we do on the Planning Commission podcast that's a lot of fun is our lightning round. It's all about you. It's all about getting to know you in a different way. And so we're just going to pepper you with all kinds of nonsensical questions until you crack. Okay. And then we'll wrap. So I'm going to start off with the first one. Tim, Boise or Boise?
No, I was told, it may have been the day I got there when I said Boise and someone said, don't say that again. I mean, I got that lesson immediately. I'll tell you who gave it to me. It was Scott Tagg. If y'all know Scott Tagg, who lives on the west side of the city, he said, Tim, let me just tell you, it's Boise.
So anybody out there watching or listening to this show, there you go. We just did you a favor, as someone so
I
eloquently
know.
did for Tim.
So Tim, your hair had a very short-lived Twitter account called Tim Keane's Hair,
Yeah.
in which
I
one
remember
had
that.
hypothesized that Farrah Fawcett and your
Right.
hair were separated at birth. Can you confirm or
Wow.
deny that?
That
Wow.
actually, that image right there is from a story in a Charleston newspaper, actually. The Twitter account didn't share that, although maybe the Twitter account shared it. I don't know where that came from exactly, which is a little bothersome. But yeah, that showed up in Atlanta. Yeah, you all can think of that what you like, I guess.
Well, my fiance both loves your hair as well as kind of your whole dress style and stuff.
Okay.
So
Well,
kudos for that. Here was another one that was on there that was, I guess, showing you doing an interview in Boston.
yeah, that was fun. Atlanta, well, I won't go into it. That's a whole nother story. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Well, I want to know, we've had another Charlestonian on here before, like now you've been Atlanta, you've been Charleston, and you're out here in the Mountain West. Like, where's the best fried chicken in Charleston?
I'm not a fried chicken person, so I'm not a good one to ask that. It's probably it probably would have been Justine's Kitchen on Meeting Street would be my guess. I mean, for relatively affordable. There's a lot of expensive food in Charleston, you might know. Fried chicken in Charleston right now is like hugely expensive, I'm sure.
Delicacy.
but I'm sure it's fantastic though.
Are you really Charlestonian? Is that where you're born and raised?
No, I grew up.
Never mind.
I grew up in Charlotte. I was in Charleston for
okay.
16 years, but I grew up in Charlotte.
Well, then you understand North Carolina or South Carolina? You understand?
Well, I was having lunch with this guy that was running for governor of South Carolina in Charleston at one point, and I came up with this for him at that time, but it was like, to me, North Carolina is James Taylor.
Yeah.
And South Carolina is James Brown. I mean,
there,
just personality wise, I mean, am I not right about
You're
that?
right.
Wow.
You're 100% correct.
And I love James Taylor and James Brown, but the differences in those personalities to me describe the differences in those states.
And hat choices.
Yeah. Well,
And mustard and barbecue sauce. That's
right. Oh yeah, we can't. Oh, let's just not even start that whole argument, Don.
So I was going to ask you a food related question too, and it was going to be finger steaks versus boiled peanuts.
Or as we say in the South, boiled peanuts.
I love boiled peanuts. Yeah. Can you get boiled peanuts in Boise? I don't know that.
Yes. I in fact, okay, there's a gentleman and his family that have started something just in the last few months, and they have a truck. Really? Yeah, they have a truck.
Hang out on Orchard and Franklin sometimes, and I think you saw them, was it on Fairview?
Fairview. Yeah.
Oh, really?
And I got 2 pounds of it. My colleague, my fellow commissioner, enjoyed some at my house. They had Cajun flavored, which is my go-to. So it was delicious. Flavored boiled peanuts. Good. It's an acquired taste because the texture, as you know. But finger steaks, are you in or are you out on that club?
I'm not sure I know what a finger steak is.
What?
We got to get off this food conversation because it's not good.
He hasn't been fully immersed. He hasn't been fully immersed in Idaho cuisine if he's not enjoyed a finger steak.
This just in: Tim Keane, planning director, has been fired from the city of Boise.
I hate to say that. I literally don't know. I'll have to look that up.
Well, think of chicken strips, but done with sirloin steak.
It's different. It's different, mind you, but we'll have to get together. I would say Dutch Goose, but it's no longer there. We'll have to find another place. But anyway, Don, I'm sure you've got a couple more in our last few minutes.
Oh man, I was just trying to think of one. I mean, what? No, I'm drawing a blank. Sorry.
Humidity or snow? Which one? Which one do you hate more?
Oh, definitely humidity. I mean, that is the thing about being in Boise is,
it doesn't exist.
I really have already, in just the few months I've been there, adapted to the point I can't handle humidity anymore. It's amazing when I go
Rough.
back to Charleston or Atlanta.
Oh yeah,
Ah.
It
no
just
doubt.
feels different now that I've been in Boise. And people were talking to me all summer in Boise about how hot it was. And I do think it didn't seem that hot to me. So I really definitely
I mean,
humidity.
how
And
many,
I haven't been here for a
showers
winter.
how many showers a day did you average in Charleston?
Well, I mean, the
All
thing
of 'em.
about it is when you're in Charleston, you don't, I mean, you get so used to being soaking wet in a suit. It really
Oh,
does
that's-
become something.
Oh,
I'm totally serious. I remember
We
this.
know you are.
Just like I'm soaked and that's it. And everything.
yes,
So
And so is everybody else.
you're right.
man.
You'd think
Every
we'd
time-
change the dress code on the East Coast sometime. I
Oh,
mean, geez,
gosh.
Tim, I just moved from Florida back to Alaska, and I am so happy.
You're in
I don't-
Alaska?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
So,
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
really disoriented right now.
Yeah,
oh
we're
no,
all
I'm
over
so,
the place.
yeah, I'm just so happy to be back where it's not
I gotta
miserable.
I had to go to the Middle East for a time in my life in Bahrain, and growing up before I went, I had the images of Desert Storm back in when they were in Kuwait and Iran or Iraq, right? And I'm thinking, oh, it's going to be hot, but it's going to be dry. And I get there, boy, was I wrong. I was in Bahrain, which is an island in the Gulf, right? So we got 115 to 120 degree Fahrenheit and 95% humidity. And I'm just like, why does anybody live here? I don't,
how I
we
feel
should
about
pay
Florida.
everybody to move because this is insanity. You know, we had our flight suits on and oh my gosh, it was just, yeah. So,
You know, you mentioned the snow. People have looked at me strange since I've gotten to Idaho in the sense that, you know, I don't ski and I don't like mountain bike and I don't, you know, trail run and I don't, you know, it's like people are just like, why are you here exactly?
Yeah, it looks
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
from the hot tub, drinking a hot toddy. That's what I tell people. When why do you
Well,
like
no.
Alaska? You love the winter? Do you ski? Nope, but I
I
like
will
looking at it.
And I will say this with all seriousness, Tim, when, you know, you and I first met after you moved here and talking to you about that, and something I really respected was what you said. I came here to solve this issue and address these issues that the city is facing. And that's my
Right.
mission. I didn't come here to whitewater raft and ski. And I can tell you, after living in Asheville, North Carolina, as long as I did, and really sensing that a lot of the people that came to that city in all types of leadership positions were there to kind of wait it out till retirement and enjoy that setting for the outdoors, which I think, while there were some very good people, detracted from the efforts we needed. The moment you said that, I was a fan, because I think it was brutally honest and told me how committed you were to helping this place be better.
Well, that's absolutely true. I have no other reason for being there. I mean, I could be the only person in town that has one reason to be here, and that is this work, you know, and just because it seems like a place that's in a formative period that can avoid, you know, what's happened in places like Atlanta when it comes to how they've grown, you know, how they've become big cities. And can we avoid that in Boise? That's the only reason to be here.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, Tim, we got to wrap this up. And like I said, we can keep talking forever. We really, truly appreciate it. This has been, like I said, everything we could imagine and then some. And we appreciate your very valuable time and certainly your perspectives. I think a lot of the things that you have said and shared have, man, just not only hit every nail on the head, but I also will say the things that you have mentioned are precisely the reasons why we do this podcast. And expressing that same general sentiment about how can we be better, more relevant, more effective, and more fulfilled, you know, in doing all of those things. So, man, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. Any lasting thoughts? So I got to.
Well, I would just say, you know, to what you just said, which is, you know, people in cities need this. It's not like this is just our own. I mean, we're investing a bunch of money in every community in planning. Well, can we invest that money in something that's giving us returns, please? You know, that's actually resulting in great value for each community. So I appreciate that you all are having this conversation, you know, as often as you do around, can we actually become a profession that is affecting people's lives in very positive ways. I mean, so thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, commissioners, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tim
Thanks a
Keane.
lot.
Thank you, my fellow
Take care.
commissioners. This has been a great episode, and we'll catch you on that flip side. Have a good day, everybody.